Askreddit thread. What technology was way ahead of its time? Going to the moon with rulers and pencils. This, of course, is talking about how they went to the moon back in the 60s without computers to create their... That is actually pretty impressive. To be fair, those were slide rulers. It is amazing to think they were using lookup tables and that they had drafters draw up everything and that it actually fit. My intro to CAD class had us try to make something in collaborative environment without using CAD. Nothing fit together between the teams and we tried to make a fucking skateboard. Let's see. Well, alright, this one's really good. You can't really compare students in an intro to CAD course with NASA scientists, though. Too late, OP just did. They had a computer, it was just ridiculously underpowered compared to modern devices. Apollo 11 was probably the first live remote patch. The lander refused to disengage from the orbiter module due to a short circuit on a fault indicator light. The programming team had to be woken up and call in to mission control late at night to develop a patch, then instruct the team to write it line by line. Wow. That's crazy. I remember I took Intro to CAD plus 2 years of architecture in high school. It was kind of weird going from AutoCAD where you draw everything with like measurements. If you want to draw a line, you type in, this line's going to be 6 feet long. So you type in 6 feet and it draws a line 6 feet long for you. And you can adjust it however you want. It was weird to go from a program where you draw everything with precise measurements to like something like Flash where you have to freeball everything. It was a hard adjustment for me when I when I started doing things more creative for YouTube stuff. Concrete was used by the Romans, as was double glazing. I don't know what double glazing is. Alright. But apart from concrete and double glazing, what have the Romans done for us? Made good roads, buildings, uniting the religion of Europe, thus giving it a fighting chance against the East. A unified language in Europe, a unified currency, and gladiator. Don't forget heating and plumbing. Wow. Aqueducts. Orgies have been around for ages. Why is double glazing apparently ahead of its time? Can everyone stop saying double glazing? I'm hungry now. I want donuts. Yeah, that's what I think of when I hear double glazing. I don't know what that is. A few years ago, I had an 89 Buick Riviera with a touchscreen computer. An 89? You could monitor fluid liquids, have it greet you on your birthday, adjust the radio station, all kinds of stuff. It wasn't perfect, but the green text on the black screen was really cool. I've never had a car before or since I'd had a built-in computer. And of course, you guys, I'm not an idiot. I know all cars have computers in them, but does your car's computer have the sexy CRT screen? That's the sexiness I was trying to convey. Wow, I can't believe this hit. Oh my god, I'm not going to do that. I think this is what you're talking about. Let's mute the volume so I don't get flagged for copyright. Ooh. 1986, and you can actually control it on the screen itself. They had touchscreen technology back then. That's kind of impressive. Early pre-1900 punch cards. While they appeared simple at first, they are basically tiny bits of memory for purely mechanical computers. They had nearly a kilobyte of data on some of the larger punch cards. They could have stored the data for some small modern-day JPEGs on what's effectively just a piece of paper. That's pretty nuts. Wow. Isn't that kind of what paper's for in the first place? I was going to say Jacquard looms because I both work an IT worker and a hand weaver. And I love that my career and my hobby have this unlikely common ancestor. Dressing a loom is basically rudimentary programming. And it amazes me that people could do with purely mechanical tools. The Zune music store, which allowed for users to stream music instead of owning all songs. Zune, isn't that the Microsoft thing? Half the shit that Microsoft made, if marketed correctly, could have been so successful. I had the Zune HD and every questioned me about it and said they liked it better than the first iPod Touch. Microsoft's so smart in the test aspects Man, I'm messing up all my words today. Microsoft, so smart in the tech aspects, but so stupid in the marketing / consumer aspect. It's sad, really. Guess you guys never had to deal with the abomination known as games or Windows Live. Yeah, that still gives people nightmares. Let's see. The Zune HD was superior product to the iPod Touch. No contest, in my opinion. Cheaper, way better screen, some awesome games, excellent sound, better UI, and no iTunes. Roman engineers. They figured out how to make water go uphill. The aqueducts they built can still be seen today, thousands of years later. They did it by having water pushed down on it from above. Think like a U-shaped straw. It levels out in the bottom half by continuously adding water from above on one side. The water is pushed up on the other side. The Romans did this with up and down hills of less than 10 degrees and over hundreds of miles. Wow. 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 How did they make it go uphill? That seems like a crazy amount to go up. So it was like the water a pipe. The anti-something mechanism. Known as the first computer by a huge margin, built thousands of years ago. 2,000 years ago. It is considered by the scientific community to approach the complexity and workmanship that only appeared in the 14th century. Let's take a look at this. Oh, you probably can't see the pictures to the side because I have it like my thing zoomed in. Oh well. Fax technology, first demonstrated in 1865. Yeah, they have all the pictures to the right, so you can't see them. I'd have to move my thing over, but I'm not going to. Dreamcast. Seriously, that console was so badass, but just never got its legs. Was going to reply to this. Controllers with screens, built-in modem, MIDI games on the memory cards, 4 slots for controllers, list goes on. At least it introduced me to my favorite game of all time and jump-started my foray into online multiplayer. Here's to you, Dreamcast and Phantasy Star Online. PSO is amazing. FOMOR for life. Doctors washing their hands. It was so ahead of its time the doctor that suggested it got laughed into a mental institution, where ironically he died of sepsis. When I learned that the Star Wars force was caused by tiny midichlorians that you couldn't see, I thought it was stupid. I'm sure germ theory was received the same way. Interchangeable parts. I was taught in school, L.E. Whitney created the concept for rifles over 200 years ago. Then on Nova, the Terracotta Army had interchangeable parts for the bronze mechanisms of the crossbow. That's over 2,000 years apart. Mind officially blown. People think that the assembly line was developed by Henry Ford. One instance of an assembly line started around 1104 AD with the creation of the Venetia Arsenal. It became so efficient that the Wikipedia article says that it was easier to sink a ship and build a new one than to repair it, because repairing a ship was kind of a hassle. Wow. Henry Ford was more accurately credited with developing, perhaps not inventing, the moving assembly line. I thought he was just the guy who kind of perfected it into the mainstream. Perfected to such a point, it made it actually a profit that people were like, oh, we should probably do this as well. Not like he's the person who invented it or anything, because that was like 19-something, and assembly line is too simple of a concept to not have been used before in the past. Kind of like how McDonald's got really big because they were like the first food company to use the assembly line into such a great success. Just like the Chinese having gunpowder before everyone else, the Chinese were way ahead of everyone else in many aspects. Well, that has to be wrong, because when I play the Chinese in Civ 5, I don't get all that tech sooner. The United States and Great Britain were able to communicate electronically via undersea cables in 1858. Before then, it took 10 days to communicate between the continents by ship. It only takes 10 days to cross the ocean? That took longer for some reason. For reference, that's 3 years before the American Civil War. You know, when everyone still rode horses. It's 2 years before Louis Pasteur proved that germs cause disease. That's right, we had transcontinental electronic communications before it was common knowledge that germs cause diseases. Definitely ahead of its time. Wow, that is pretty impressive. This would make a really good video. 10 things that were way ahead of their time. Number 3, the telegraph cable under the ocean in 1858. A friend of mine bought the Sony mini disc in 1992. It cost almost $800, but it was amazing. The idea of storing music on this little disc and being able to add and delete songs just never took off. Mini discs were great and still used in radio journalism until relatively recently. The main problem with them, as far as I've been told, was that Sony didn't see the potential they had for data and only let them be used for audio. That's how you know Neo was a true hacker. Trade files on mini discs. The Greeks were experimenting with steam power as far back as the 1st century BC, but as far as we know, they didn't have any practical applications for it. An Egyptian called Hieron built a steam engine that moved. It spun around in circles and no more than a party trick, really. It wasn't thought of very highly. Around the same time, the Greeks, or the Romans, can never remember, were moving boats across the isthmus at Coron on tracks. If the Romans/Greeks had have known about this, I'm sure they would have figured out its practical applications and the world would have been very different than it is today. That is true. If I recall correctly, it was not the fact that they didn't figure out the practical uses of steam at the time, but that they lacked the metallurgy needed for the engine to sustain high-pressured steam and therefore an actual useful amount of steam power. I guess that's true. The British Rail Advanced Passenger Train. This train was developed throughout the 70s with the prototype being released in 1978. It was one of the first trains to incorporate tilting technology to aid in cornering. But as it turned out, it had been so well designed that the train cornered, the tilt angle completely canceled out the centripetal force felt by passengers, which, as it turns out, includes motion sickness. Ultimately, the trains were withdrawn and the technology sold to the Italians, only to be sold back to the UK 10 years later in the form of Pendolino trains. TLDR, the British built a retarded train. Wait. So it gave the passengers motion sickness? It was one of the first with active tilt. The Canadian turbo train of the 60s had passive tilt, and actually was a considerably more advanced train. The APT's bad rap also came from the fact that BR was liquoring up the press on demo runs. Drunk reporters getting queasy wasn't helping, though. Modern tilt trains tend not to fully balance out the force. Don't feel bad about Pendolino. At least it's a decent train. In the US, we got Bombardier-built Acelia, which has been total junk. The ABB-built X2000 was tested in the US and preferred by everyone, even Amtrak. It ran at faster speeds and ran much faster through curves than SL can, but the snowmobile company got the Canadian government to finance the equipment, and Amtrak had to take the lowest bidder. They're barely 15 years old and Amtrak's already looking for replacements. It's widely known in the industry that Amtrak will not buy a Bombardier product ever again. FWIW. The first generation TGVs are still in service, and the Zero Series Shinkansens were running until maybe 5 years ago. It uses lots of technical jargon that I don't understand. Technical jargon in the train department, I should say. The Greek flamethrower. I heard Xerox made a lot of devices that were ahead of its time. They also made voice-controlled printers, but they had some glitch that didn't activate the microphones unless you screamed at the top of your lungs. Brett motherfucker. The Sega Game Gear, which generated over 4,000 colors, released in 1991. 7 years later, Nintendo put out a Game Boy with 50 colors. 4 years later, that 2001, they released something with more. The Game Gear failed to catch on because it ate batteries like crazy. The device is basically unusable without the battery pack. I went through so many batteries in my Game Boy Color. Cadillac V864. It was a V8 engine introduced by Caddy in 1981 that could shut down 2 or 4 cylinders for better fuel economy. Unfortunately, due to the electrical controls available at consumer-grade prices back then, it suffered reliability issues, and most systems were disconnected. Holy crap, I'm messing up so many of these. Which left the engine a perfectly serviceable V8 with typical V8 fuel economy. Only in the past few years has high-quality controls technology trickled down in price, such as cylinder deactivation, has become a successful thing, with many manufacturers employing an onboard range of V6 and V8 engine cars. This is not a good thread for me to read. So many big words. So many big, simple words that I'm messing up. Everything Charles Babbage invented was way ahead of its time, hence he is not very recognizable. I don't know who that is. The Jacquard loom was made in the 1800s. It's a programmable loom where you use punch cards to create complicated patterns for textiles. The punch cards can be considered revolutionary for computer programming today. SR-71 Blackbird. Built in 1964, is still the fastest plane ever to fly. The amazing plane was recorded flying 2,193.13 miles per hour and would fly at 80,000 feet, all while taking pictures of things on the ground. It was pretty much untargetable due to the plane's composition, material, speed, and altitude. Plus, Hasbro thought it was so badass, they copied it for Cobra to use to fight against G.I. Joe with. Ha. When I was in 6th grade, I'm 27 now, I had a watch that could take pictures. I felt so popular amongst the nerds. That's pretty awesome. First gen Sony PSP. You could hack that thing to do anything. Mine had an SCNS emulator. Plus, the fact that it was Wi-Fi enabled was huge. Having a web browser that could pull up full versions of website was just not done when that came out. Not to mention mobile multiplayer. Oh, my PSP. When I bought that thing in 2009, I remember it was 2009 because I bought the Madden 2009 edition. Actually, it was 2008. If I bought it with Madden 2009 edition, those always come out a year early, so I bought it in 2008 because it was blue. I only got it because it was blue. I didn't really care about the game. I used that thing literally every single day for about 5 years. It was like the most bang for the buck thing I've ever bought, where I bought something expensive and I used the hell out of it because it was a great audiobook like thing, because it saved the position of the audiobook every time you turned off the PSP. Even if you play like a different game or something, you go back to your sound files and it saved it. It also had different like files, so you could play other stuff besides the audiobooks, plus you could store videos on it, and of course, play video games, and you can browse the internet. That thing was amazing. Plus, you could hack it too. I ended up hacking mine to see if I could put a Super Nintendo emulator on it. I did, but I was like, I could just do this on my computer instead. I don't really need to do this anymore. I kind of wish I hadn't done that though, because I had a game on there I really like playing, and I haven't been able to. Like, it doesn't connect to the internet anymore, and I need to connect to the internet in order to play the game I bought for it a whole long time ago that I used to play on it all the time. Oh, PSP was great. Except the slow-ass medium they used for games, the load times on that thing were excruciating. Loco Roco was the best. My wife preferred Loco Roco, but I like Pirates and Patapon. Oh, Patapon's so fun. Patapon, pon, Patapon. Patapon is a game where you have to move and fight using beats. If you don't do the beat correctly, they don't move. It's pretty fun. It sounds dumb, but it's a lot of fun. It also has RPG elements to it where you upgrade your units and you trade them out. It's like a real-time RPG rhythm game. I don't think I've ever played any game like it before. It's so much great, so much fun. Masonry. We don't really lay bricks any different than the Romans did. The mother of all demos. This was basically everything we had today, but only 1960. Mother of all demos. Isn't that just programming? This is basically everything we have today, but only 1960. Wow, even things like instant messaging are included. At least we have color. That's funny. And we still don't have a way to collaboratively edit the same document from two remote locations in real time. At least not one that people are aware of and use. I didn't watch the video, but isn't Google Drive pretty well known as a collaborative document editor? Yes. That's exactly what I was thinking about when I was reading that. It's like Google Drive does that. The Palm Pilot. Electric cars. The first practical version was invented in 1884. They were popular in the late 19th century and early 20th century, but were later beaten by petrol and diesel-based vehicles. Anyone remember the Sega Channel? I remember being able to choose which games to play from the TV. Shit was so futuristic to me. What? The Sega Channel? That sounds awesome. Except the 32X Saturn CD-ROMs, for example. I love the Sega Channel. I used to play it all the time, except when my dad would kick me out of the room to smoke crack. It was literally the best thing a kid could have, way ahead of its time. Cloud-based game delivered in 1994. Seriously fucking amazing. That sounds like the internet, but better. Sort of. It was an interactive through your cable provider. Each month would feature maybe 15 different games. I remember we were poor growing up, and they had a special where for the first month was free for a while. My mom would sign up for a month, cancel for 30 days, then sign up free for another month. She did that for about a year. Wow. Ugh. Microsoft with their tablet PC. Roman concrete, blah, blah, blah. Structures like the Pantheon. Transistors. They not only made everything smaller, but more recently, they've been shown to have the ability to learn. Pretty interesting little things. Wow. Are you sure you're not talking about memorstrons? What? The turbo encubulator. Who would have thought that the module interaction of magnetometry I'm not even gonna try. Could be harnessed so many decades ago. I know some of those words. Alright, I'm just gonna end this here. I didn't know I was reading for like 20 minutes already.